Turkeys are on a lot of people's minds these days and turkey hunting, but to have good turkey hunting, you need good quality habitat. So I want to take some time and talk about habitat, not only from the management point of view, but also how to hunt in different types of habitat. In today's typical pine management, I'm standing in a fairly mature pine forest. Now, loblolly pines will live a long time, but a lot of mills can only take a certain size pine anymore, so people don't let them reach the older age classes. In this case, this landowner's primary objective is turkeys, not even deer, but turkeys, and pine and income from pines is secondary. So they've done a really good job of thinning here. The pines you see behind me are roughly about that magic 60 basal feet per acre, somewhere right in there. You notice there's plenty of sunlight coming down and the canopies aren't necessarily rubbing against each other. And the reason that number works well is all this green coming up. Now this was burned a few weeks ago, and all this green coming up is ideal turkey feeding area. Not just the green, but this new growth is attracting a lot of insects. And when we burned all the pine straw and duff off here, that exposed a lot of overwintering insects. Now, this is coupled with, this is a good manager on this property, and right here is a block that hasn't been burned and is pretty good nesting habitat. So we've got nesting right next to feeding. And when you have that, of course, Tom's gonna be circulating the area. Matter of fact, when we were pulling up here right now to film this, there was a tom right over here and it looked like maybe some hens right over here. I'm sure he'd been strutting right on the edge of this pine stand, and the hens are coming in here, and he was there strutting because he probably knows the hens have been feeding in here a lot. So the management here was, of course, they planted pines years ago. Let's just throw out a number of 30. And then they thinned, probably about 15, give or take, and maybe thinned again. He's at a state now where he's gonna continue burning this with the rotation of growing season here in South Carolina. Let's call that August, even into September, maybe July, and dormant season before stuff greens up. And the combination of the two, dormant and growing season fires, gives a much more diverse plant base than just that typical dormant season fire that a lot of people use. If you think about it, most grasses will hold their seed heads well into the fall or after it's green, and then you do a dormant season burn, well, that seed falls right on the ground on that fresh seed bed, and you get more and more grasses. You can become a grass monoculture if all you do is use prescribed fire during the dormant season. By kind of rotating maybe a dormant season burn and then a couple years later a growing season burn, you get a much more diverse plant complex, and growing season burns tend to favor forbs. Think of ragweed or plants like that create a more umbrella habitat, a stem coming up and then it kind of leaves out, which is ideal poult habitat. Those leaves coming out on top keep a little bit more moisture down here, and research has shown that there are way more bugs or insects using those forbs than there are grasslands, and insects are a key part of a turkey's diet. That umbrella habitat is also critical for keeping avian predators from seeing those poults running around and knocking them off. So this is going to be a great habitat. He did a dormant season burn now, and a couple of years from now, depending on how much fuel accumulates and the weather, we'll do a growing season burn and just keep that rotation to keep the plant diversity where we want it for ideal turkey and deer habitat. If I was hunting this right now, if I was scouting today and I'm going to hunt tomorrow morning, I would set up over here. There's gonna be hens in there for sure, but toms, they wanna strut in this open area. Think of that Volkswagen with the doors open, that strutting tom. If you got too much vegetation sitting in the doors or the wings all the time, and of course the dew, humidity, whatever, is gonna be much lower right here. Turkeys don't like walking in really wet vegetation, gets their feathers wet. This is ideal strutting habitat for a tom. Those hens are gonna be coming off that nesting habitat, feeding in here. This is where if I was a tom, I'd be looking for hens, and as a hunter, I'd be looking for a tom.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, Moultrie Mobile, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, RTP Outdoors, Fourth Arrow, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Ward Laboratories, Burris Optics, National Land Realty, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
Of course, this vegetation is going to grow, but not in time to be nesting habitat, and likely not in time to be good brood rearing habitat this year. That's another reason you want to rotate in good growing season prescribed fires. Because you think about this, if you burn this in late July, August, September, you're setting it back, it's not going to grow that much or get that thick over the winter, and it's going to flush in the spring, which makes ideal both nesting and brood habitat. And those ideal habitats aren't that thick at the bottom, so those poults can walk around freely, have that umbrella habitat. So it's real important, if turkeys are a big part of your management goal, or even a 50% part, to work in those growing season burns. When I say growing season burns, I'm usually talking pines. You can tell some of these trees got scarred pretty high, but pines have real thick bark. They're fine, they didn't even know the fire went through here. But if you'd scarred a hardwood 6, 8 feet tall, you may have really injured or even killed that tree. It may take a year or two for it to die, but you've certainly injured that tree. So there's much more flexibility in managing pines than there is hardwoods, because you can't use prescribed fire as intently or even maybe as frequently in hardwoods, and there's not a good herbicide option for hardwoods. There's many herbicide options for pines, and everyone knows that I'm not like, oh, you got to use herbicide. I look at herbicide like a root canal. I only want to use it if I have to. I only want a root canal to save any other teeth should I need that procedure. But in this case, one coat of a herbicide in the imazapyr family, a lot of people know as arsenal or chopper Gen 2, a lot of different formulations of that herbicide, will knock down the hardwood saplings for many, many years. And if we don't do that, this area would fill up with sweet gum here in South Carolina and be so thick, it would be zero quality turkey habitat. You almost can't keep them in check with prescribed fire only. But one pass with that herbicide for decades and then follow up with prescribed fire will maintain that of high quality habitat. When I look at hardwoods, I can burn dormant season. Usually I couldn't even get a fire to carry in growing season because that canopy is so thick, it's just holding a layer of humidity in there. And then if I do get a really dry day and I burn those hardwoods too warm when all that sap is up in the tree, I'm gonna have some mortality in there. So I have many more tools, as I mentioned earlier, to manage pines for high quality habitat. And then people yell and scream when I say something, what about acorns, what about acorns? Well, turkeys eat a wide variety of insects, snakes, worms, vegetation. Hundreds of species of plants and animals have been identified in the turkey's diet. They're going to survive with or without acorns. Acorns are certainly a high source of energy, and that can be good, especially further north where the winters are a little tougher. But the early explorers I often refer to talked about these large pine savannas and more turkeys than they could count. Turkeys in the thousands, not a dozen or 2 dozen. And they were surviving in pine savannas. That doesn't mean I don't like shinning up a tree next to a big white oak shedding acorns in fall when I'm chasing whitetails. But I want to tell you, even good savanna habitat is very productive for whitetails as well as turkeys. An important consideration for people that may be thinning pines like this and using fire is watching for invasive exotic species. For example, in the South, privet is a big concern in a lot of areas. And if you did this and you just don't use dormant season fire and no herbicide, this could become a privet jungle. Deer will eat privet a little bit, but it's not high quality forage, and privet doesn't do anything for turkeys. It shades out the ground, there's no nesting or brooding habitat. So just a little reminder, if you're managing for high quality habitat in pines and you're opening up the canopy, it's important to watch for invasive exotics and control them when the population is really small versus waiting a few years and all of a sudden now you've got a very expensive and timely job. It takes a lot of time to remove those invasive exotic species. So what we're looking at is clearly not management for industrial pine management or a tree farm where the number one objective is making as much money as I can off a pine tree. I get hate mail from loggers or foresters, which just amazes me because the people I tend to work with timber production, timber value is only a part of their objectives. It's not their whole objective. And wildlife oftentimes is as much or more of their management objective as the timber value is. So obviously there's some high dollar trees behind me, and this landowner is going to reap the reward of doing timber management. He's not maximizing that return off the pines, but he is maximizing the return off wildlife, which adds value to him and his family. And from a resale point of view in the current market, really well managed wildlife properties are certainly selling more than an industrial tract of pine timber. It's really important to understand the landowner's objectives, because there is no one plan. People often get hold of us, just send me a plan for something else you did and I'll pay a little bit of money, or I just want a cookie cutter plan, or tell me the 3 things I need to do to grow giant deer or a lot of turkeys on my property. Well, it doesn't work that way. Each plan needs to be tailored for the property. Maybe you've got a big hardwood swamp, or maybe you're mainly hardwoods, or maybe you're unmanaged pines for 20 years and you're basically starting from scratch. You got to start over. So we want to tailor the plan for the landowner's mission. And we all need a mission, right? And I hope you have a mission for your life, and part of that mission includes getting outside and enjoying creation, but even more importantly, it should be your mission every day to be quiet and seek the Creator's will for your life. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.